computer. Okay, so tonight we have 3 presentations, and maybe I should introduce one at a time. So we start with Rebecca Rutstein, has been an artist in residence at locations around the world, including 6 expeditions at sea and 2 trips to the ocean floor. Her collaborations with scientists have been funded by the National Science Foundation, by the National Academy of Sciences, among others. Her work has been exhibited widely in museums and institutions, and she is the recipient of several awards. And I will introduce later Blanca Bercial and Pantea Karimi. Rebecca, all yours. I stop sharing. And now you can share, and we will kill our video to give you maximum bandwidth, okay?
That sounds great. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I am Rebecca Rutstein. I'm a Philly-based multidisciplinary artist working at the intersection of arts and technology. And for about 20 years, I've been creating work inspired by geology and the natural world. And over the last 5 years, I've been collaborating with scientists exploring the deep sea. And those collaborations have really, really changed the trajectory of my artistic practice and really given me a greater sense of purpose in my work. I feel really passionate about creating visual experiences that shed light on places and processes that are hidden from view, to connect the viewer with the ocean and the natural world in the face of climate change. And I fell in love with geology back in undergrad as an art major, but it didn't really weave its way into work until many years later. And when it did, I started doing site-specific residencies around the world at locations that were geologically inspiring to me. And so I was in the Canadian Rockies, and then I ended up in Hawaii studying the Kilauea volcano, and I was creating narratives about that. And it was there that I came across this sonar map of the ocean floor, which was actually created through sound waves. It's multi-beam sonar technology, and I was really fascinated by all that was hidden beneath the ocean's surface, and it became more interesting to me than actually the islands themselves. And so I took a deep dive into wanting to explore this place and was trying to figure out a way to get down in a submarine. This is back in 2005, but I kept hitting dead ends with that attempt. But I kept creating these narratives, sort of envisioning this kind of hidden space and doing research into people that were explorers themselves. And so fast forward to 2012, I continued my kind of geologic journey to Iceland, where I was an artist in residence, and I was looking at the glaciers and the Mount Hekla volcano. And it was there that I started working with kind of expanding outside of painting. So, you know, I was kind of creating these undulating forms in my paintings, and I wanted to somehow bring them off the canvas. And so I started working with laser cut steel and taking painted forms and actually, you know, putting them through a digital process to laser cut them out of steel. And so I sort of liked the juxtapositions that started to happen with the work. You know, looking at them, they sort of look like cut paper, you know, very delicate, kind of lacy material, but they're actually very structurally sound, being steel. And so I also kind of was interested in the interplay between it looking like it was perhaps created in a 3D modeling program where actually it's all kind of hand-drawn lines, and so there's irregularities in them. And so a lot of my work sort of plays with juxtapositions. I started continuing with kind of working with the laser cut steel and created this installation that works, that was inspired by cloud formations, and sort of taking, kind of deconstructing a painting or taking a drawing and putting it into space. And so at the time, this is my boys in 2015, just for scale. These pieces are about 5 by 10 feet. I was making paintings at the time also, kind of playing again with juxtapositions, so looking at graphic imagery juxtaposed with very kind of atmospheric passages. And these were some other paintings that I was making as part of this exhibition, thinking about cloud forms. I also really kind of like to play with micro and macro in my work, and so kind of looking at different vantage points within one painting. So it was around this time that I was awarded my first public art project. This was in 2015, and this was a 40 by 70 foot installation at Temple University. And so I was continuing to work with the laser cut steel, but also was working with some new technology, working with LED lights and light sensors that would detect when the sun would set and rise. And so it would go through this sort of change of light through the course of the evening. And hopefully my video will play okay. But here you can see there was light pollution in Philadelphia that the students were begging to see stars, and so I kind of created this starry night, twinkling star effect in the sculpture. Hopefully you'll be able to see this video. But this is actually a little bit of a time lapse of some of the lighting that occurred throughout the course of the evening and into the night and into the next morning. So it was really interesting to work with a team of people on this project and to sort of expand the scope of what I was doing outside of the gallery and to create something that would have a kind of positive effect and be a dynamic experience for people in the community. And at the same time that this was all happening, this is still in 2015, my dream of going down in a submersible got a step closer because I was invited on a research vessel to do a trip from an expedition from to California. And we were going to be mapping the ocean floor using technology similar to the map that I shared with you back from Hawaii in 2005. And so we were using multi-beam sonar sound waves to image the ocean floor and seeing a swath of data coming up on the screen that had never been seen before. Most of the ocean has not been mapped in high resolution. And so it was really exciting to see new terrain being revealed for the first time. And so we would take our data and put it into a 4D modeling program on the ship. And hopefully you're able to see this. This is actually the data underneath the Galapagos Islands. This is the data collected and rendered and animated. So this is sort of flying through as if you were swimming at the bottom underneath the Galapagos Islands. It's the Galapagos Rift Zone. And so I was really fascinated by this hidden landscape, wanted to take portions of it and pull it into paintings. So I was taking screen grabs and then pulling them into while I was at sea. And so again, working with kind of a lot of motion and sort of uncontrolled paint with these sort of delineated graphic maps on top. And we were actually trailing a hurricane in the Pacific. And so I sort of embraced the motion of the ship and started pouring the paint to sort of allow the motion of the ship to be captured in the dispersion of paint. These are some of the other paintings I was making, again, all about the Galapagos. And from here, I just kept wanting to go back out to sea. My husband jokes that when we got married, he never saw it coming that I'd become a sailor. And I didn't either, but as soon as I went out on an expedition, I just wanted to keep going back out to sea. It was just drawing me there. So I was invited on the fall quarter the following year to sail from Vietnam to Guam, and also for a trip in Tahiti. And so from Vietnam to Guam, we were looking at satellite data and mapping data, and I was making paintings in the wet lab of the ship that were inspired by this data. And so through my collaborations with scientists and these expeditions, I started to expand my network and relationships with people, and I got invited into a collective called the Ocean Memory Project. And the Ocean Memory Project was born out of a conference from the National Academies of Science Keck Futures Initiative on the Deep Blue Sea. And through this project, artists and scientists and people in the humanities are exploring how environmental changes may be recorded in ocean memories through genetic mechanisms within organisms like microbial networks or within the structure of the ocean itself. And it's been a really fascinating exploration that I've been working with this group of people for the last 3 years. And so from that, I was invited by one of the scientists, Mandy Joy, on an expedition on the Atlantis in 2018. And excitingly, she invited me finally down in a trip in Alvin, the submersible, down at the bottom of the ocean. And it turned out that I was invited on 2 different expeditions back to back, and it was just a really exciting moment to be finally getting an opportunity to go down. This is the science lab on the research vessel in the Atlantis, and we're all kind of crowded together. They're working on samples, and I'm making my work, and we're all sort of collaborating, and there's a lot of energy and excitement. This was where I went with Mandy. This was in the Guaymas Basin off the coast of California, the coast of Mexico in the Gulf of California. And it was a really interesting place because there's 2 tectonic plates that are separating, hydrothermal vents that are spewing out chemicals, but you have these land masses really close together that are dropping down sediment on top of the vents, and it creates this a lot of heat and pressure with the chemicals that causes new oil to form very, very quickly. And so it's a very interesting place to look at ancient processes in real time and look at chemosynthetic life. And so I'm just going to show some pictures of Alvin and the dive, but this is Alvin being recovered and brought back to the ship, being brought onto deck. This is the 6-foot titanium sphere that you see in front of you is where the 2 passengers and the pilot reside. It's very tight quarters. When you're getting into Alvin, you feel like you're an explorer or an astronaut, and everyone's sort of cheering you on, an aquanaut. And it's very momentous and terrifying at the same time. And this is being lowered. Inside the vessel, it looks more spacious than it actually is. And I think one of the most incredible parts was going down the water column for almost 2 hours in the darkness and seeing all the bioluminescent life. It was a really spiritual experience that I want to be able to share in future pieces of work that I do. Some images we saw on the ocean floor. These are tube worms that I saw off the coast of Costa Rica on my other dive. And these are tube worms called Riftia tube worms that I saw in Guaymas Basin with Mandy. There's hydrothermal vents and all of this bacteria and microbes that are mediating processes at the bottom of the ocean. And so we would take samples and bring them back up onto deck, and I would look through the microscope and see these bacteria and microbes and then make paintings inspired by what I was seeing. And so I started making these little paintings on the ship and looking at microbes and the mapping data that we were collecting. And from there, Mandy is a professor at the University of Georgia. They were really interested in our collaboration and in what we were doing together. And so they invited me to be a visiting chair at the university and to have an exhibition at the Georgia Museum of Art. And so I created these paintings that were larger scale. It was about a 22-foot tall installation kind of looking at these microbes on a large scale and sort of sharing this hidden world and these hidden processes with the public. And so these are some of the paintings from that series. And then the other major part of the exhibit was this interactive installation called Shimmer. And basically I was working with hydrocarbon structures, which are part of the oil that was forming in that, the basis of the oil that was forming in the Guaymas Basin, as I mentioned. And then also looking at, and hopefully you can see this video, looking at bioluminescent life in the deep sea. And so I actually worked with video footage of an organism called a Safanophore that creates trails of light. And so there are motion sensors on either end of the piece, and when you walk by it, you create this disturbance in the piece. And so it was really an exciting project that kind of enlightened people about these mysteries and this kind of hidden network in the deep sea. Here's one more video. Hopefully you guys are able to see it. One of the really interesting things I learned is that there's a rare Safanophore, this organism, in the Guaymas Basin in the Gulf of California that actually, it glows a red light. It creates it's like a lure. It's luring other organisms to come toward it by them mistaking it as a copepod. And so I was really fascinated by this trickery that was happening with the bioluminescent communication in the deep sea. And in between kind of working on these larger projects, I'm always working in the studio thinking about microbial networks and different structures in the deep sea. This is methane hydrate crystals, thinking about bioluminescent communication, and all of these sorts of thoughts about patterns in nature that repeat themselves. And so I just wanted to share a couple more recent projects. This is a new public art project called Convergence, and it is in Philadelphia. It's on the AT&T building on the Schuylkill River, and it is a reflection of the Schuylkill River and surrounding environment. It's capturing intersecting lines of roads and bridges and pathways, trails and modes of transport that are all converging in this one spot in Philadelphia. And for me, I feel like public art can really humanize the built environment, and I wanted to have a positive impact on this stretch of the river where a lot of people are converging. And so it was exciting to work on a project of this scale. It's 63 by 124 feet. More recently, I'm not going to share that video because I'm afraid you're not going to see it, but more recently, I just completed the installation of this project in central Pennsylvania. It is called Ridge and Valley, and these are renderings for this piece. It's actually made out of Corten steel. It's 67 feet long, and it's inspired by geologic maps that highlight a distinct feature of dramatic bends and folds of the Appalachian Mountains as they run through Pennsylvania. And I was really interested in working in outside of an urban setting and creating something that would be bold and have presence, but also be harmonious in its surroundings. One of the interesting things that came out of this is working with the cutout pieces from the plasma cut steel. So all of those pieces were going to be discarded, and instead I used them to create a new pathway in the woods on another part of this sculpture park. And so I'm curious to see how this will evolve over time. And I love the sort of organic quality of it compared to the more kind of architectural and kind of mechanical and rigid quality of the other piece. I wanted to leave you with a project that I'm working on now with a scientist and another artist. It's called the Immersion Project. Immersive, interactive art experience that would have a second life as an artificial reef in the deep sea. And I'm working with a scientist who has been studying the degradation of corals in the Gulf of Mexico, in the deep sea, since the BP oil spill of 2010. And so we came up with this idea together to create 3D printed forms inspired by corals that would be printed out of sustainable materials in a modular way to create these sort of monumental clusters that would be interactive with light. For those that don't know, there's a lot of coral that's bioluminescent, and also there would be acoustics, there would be a lot of sort of sensorial inputs into this piece. And after the life of the exhibition, portions of the exhibit would actually be submerged in the deep sea of the Gulf of Mexico at like 1,800 meters to help propagate ecosystems that have been lost because of the loss of coral in this area. So I really am excited about this project because I feel like it's taking, you know, the shimmer installation with light and bringing it into a fully immersive environment. And it's going beyond aesthetics, it's resonating beyond that to create something that might have positive ecological impact. And so I'm hoping to do more work like this. So thank you so much for letting me share.
Hey, so very good. So all the videos were decent, only one wasn't moving, but the others, I think we got the point. I have a question, and I see that's also a question from the audience. So my question is, so you are truly a multimedia artist because these are all different. I mean, you do painting, you do sculpture, you do interactive installations, you do mural art. And behind each one, we've seen that there's a process, there's a lot of thinking, right? I mean, all the way traveling all over the world. But in terms of communicating with the audience, in terms of you know, creating an emotion and creating some thinking in the audience, which one you think is more effective, or at least is more rewarding for you?
Are you talking about which piece, or?
No, which kind?
I'm not sure, you broke up a little bit.
Oh, which kind?
You know, I really am excited about, can you hear me?
Yes.
I've been really excited about like the shimmer piece that I did in Georgia with the interactive light. I'm really excited about that because it really captured, you know, audiences over the course of the last few years, and actually they're keeping it at the museum because of the impact it's had. And I'm trying to get people to feel connected to a place that they probably will never see, and to feel a deeper appreciation, and to sort of get a sense of the sublime. And so for me, I'm really interested in pushing those kind of interactive types of installations. And that's why I'm excited about this last project, the Immersion Project, because it would really create a space to move into rather than just something along the wall. And so we're trying to get funding to make this happen, and I'm excited about it. So.
Okay, you see the questions. You have two questions. You want to read them yourself?
Okay, I did not. Sure. Do you want me to read them out loud?
Sure.
Or do you want me? Okay. Hi, I'm Gia Manchada, a senior in high school studying the IBDP. Could you please elaborate on your thought process behind each of the steps in your journey? This is really interesting. I mean, I think, I don't know exactly how to say that in a succinct way, but I could send you an answer. But I think that, you know, I think the most important thing is to sort of be open to the possibilities, because I never thought when I was younger that I would be, you know, traveling the world on research vessels. And in fact, when I was in college, like I was an art major, but I took a geology class just out of curiosity, not realizing that it would have such an impact on me. And so I think that, getting out of your comfort zone and being open to possibilities and sort of letting, one thing feed into the next is really, really important to grow. So I think that I don't know exactly what my journey is going to be, but I'm, open to the possibilities. And I think that's just a really an important thing to do, to get out of your comfort zone. So
You have another question.
the other question was, Stephen Litvin, you deal with many different environmental contexts: geological, biological, freshwater, deep sea. How does your process stay the same across these contexts, and how do they change? I'm interested in sort of creating, as things have evolved, I realize that I'm interested in sort of sharing the invisible, like trying to make the invisible visible and trying to share these kind of hidden networks to get people to feel more connected with the natural world. And so for me, they're all sort of part of that, and so I keep getting pulled into different projects. And, right now there's a planetary scientist that I'm going to collaborate with that's looking at meteorites, and she's looking under the microscope, these like minutiae, and I'm going to create really big paintings to sort of maybe share this information on a really large scale. And so to me, it's about kind of creating connection by getting people to see things they don't normally see. So I hope that answered the question.
Okay, very good.